Story 1. I want to go home. As a pizza delivery guy, I was used to late-night calls, but this one was different. The order was for a hospital, an unusual destination, but not unheard of. Hospitals, after all, are places that never truly sleep, with staff and patients often keeping unconventional hours. I remember checking the order slip multiple times as I drove. The address was clear, but the instructions were oddly specific. Use the side entrance near the east wing. Deliver to the check-in desk. Hospitals are like small cities. There's often a maze of halls and multiple wings, so I appreciated the detailed directions. Pulling into the hospital's parking lot, I felt a sense of unease. Hospitals at night have a peculiar atmosphere, a mix of calm and underlying urgency. The fluorescent glow of the overhead lights, the sterile smell that seems to seep out from the walls, and the silence, which is only occasionally broken by the distant sound of trolleys or muffled voices, are all things that are to be expected. It can be a creepy place for sure if you're not a regular there. I found the side entrance as instructed. It was a nondescript door, distinguishable only by a small sign that read, East Wing. Pushing the door open, I stepped into a world that felt removed from the outside. The air was cooler, and the lighting dimmer. The corridor stretched out before me, lined with closed doors and the occasional framed artwork that did little to warm its sterile appearance. I made my way to the check-in desk, a small unoccupied island in the midst of this sea of quiet. I glanced around, half expecting someone to appear, but there was no one. The scene was unsettling. Hospitals are places of life and activity, but here, in this secluded wing, it was, well, dead. I set the pizza down on the desk, scanning the area for any sign of the person who had placed the order. Minutes passed, but there was nobody. I wanted to just leave the pizza at the desk, but I couldn't because I hadn't yet been paid. It was then that I heard it, a voice so faint and so sorrowful. "I just want to go home," the voice whispered. It wasn't a scary voice, but it definitely didn't make me feel at ease any, given the ambiance of the place. I turned towards the source of the voice, finding myself looking into one of the recovery rooms to my right. The door was slightly open, and inside, a faint lamp illuminated a bed where a man lay. He was surrounded by medical equipment, tubes connecting him to machines that were placed all around the bed. Our eyes met, and I'll never forget his gaze. I saw the most heartbreaking look of sadness and longing. It was a look that cried out for the simple comfort of home. Before I could react, the arrival of the person who had ordered the pizza snapped me out of my gaze. A nurse, with wrinkled scrubs and a look of fatigue on her face, rushed to the desk. She apologized profusely for not being present when I arrived and handed me the payment. I told her that it wasn't a problem, and collected as I handed over the pizza. When I turned back to leave, I looked back at the room where the man was. It was empty. Completely empty. The light was off, the bed neatly made, and there was no sign of the man or the medical equipment that had surrounded him. It was as though the room had been untouched for days. The empty room shocked me. Had I imagined it all? I couldn't shake the image of the man's eyes, the depth of sorrow they held. There was no way I could have imagined it. I turned to ask the nurse, but at the last minute, decided not to say anything. I didn't want to sound crazy. Instead, I tried to shake it off and decided to just leave. My thoughts on the way back to the store were consumed by the mystery of what I had seen, or thought I had seen. The image of that man, his plea for help, and all the medical equipment that surrounded him were all so vivid. There was no way that I could have imagined all that up in my head. That night remains engraved in my memory. Every time I drive by that hospital, I think of that man, or whatever it was that I saw. I can still see that gaze, the tubes, and the medical equipment, and I can still hear that cry for help. I've never experienced anything like it before or since. Without a shadow of a doubt, I saw something that night that I'll never be able to explain. Story 2. Open the box. I remember this one delivery like it was yesterday. On a day that started out like any other, it boggles my mind how quickly things can take a turn. It was the scariest and most random and bizarre encounter I'd ever had in my life. It was my final delivery of the night, a trip out to the rural edges of town where the streetlights disappear and the houses were spread far apart with almost nothing but trees in between them. The address took me down a dirt road where the signal on my phone became as unreliable as the flickering headlights of my old delivery car. As my car rattled along, a creepy feeling began to wash over me. I continued to follow the directions and was finally greeted by a yard cluttered with random junk. Microwaves, chairs, broken appliances, you name it, and it was there, strewn across the property like a metallic graveyard. I drove further in, searching for a house that wasn't showing up. Initially, all I found was a clearing with a turnaround spot. Confused, I stopped the car and looked out into the darkness. It was then that I saw it. A trailer, as best as I could describe, tucked beneath some overgrown trees. It didn't look like a place someone could live, but the address matched, and I had a pizza to deliver. I approached the trailer quietly and cautiously. The creepy unease I had felt on my initial drive in hadn't gone away. In fact, it was intensifying. Before I could even knock on the door, it burst open, and a figure emerged. A man who looked like he hadn't seen civilization or a shower in months. His clothes were a mess, his beard was nasty, and in his hands, he held a hunting knife and a gun tucked into his waistband. My heart skipped a beat. "Hey man, pizza delivery?" I stuttered, holding out the pizza like a shield. "I've got your order here." "Is that right?" the man barked, squinting at me through suspicious eyes. "I don't have Wi-Fi or a phone. How in the hell would I be able to order a pizza?" "Maybe a family member ordered for you?" I suggested, my voice still stuttering. "If you don't want it, no problem. I can take it back." "All my family's dead," he said, and his tone made me believe it. "Want to know how they died?" I shook my head, desperately thinking of a way to get back to my car. "I'm good, thanks. Just going to leave your pizza here." Before I could turn, though, he jumped down and blocked my path. "People driving around here with no markings on their cars get shot," he warned, and every horror story I'd ever heard about the backwoods seemed to come alive in that moment. Trying to diffuse the tension, I blurted out something about the plain car being for rough terrain, better suited for the boonies than our branded vehicles. To my surprise, it seemed to calm him down a bit. He nodded as if that made some sense to him, but then he said, "Wait here, I've got something for you." My instincts screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. As he threw the door to his trailer open and motioned inward, I saw something that sent me into a full-blown panic. Strapped to the wall of the inside of his trailer looked to be something that resembled the appearance of a dead animal hanging. This was too much for me, and I decided that it was time to go. Before I could turn, though, the man re-emerged holding a small box filled with something. "Here," he said. "Open it." "Oh," I said back. "I don't need anything, just here to deliver the pizza." He took a step forward, the knife still in his hand. "Open the box," he demanded. "I need to make sure it's not a bomb." My mind raced. Was this guy serious? A bomb? Unfortunately, the expression on the man's face told me that he was dead serious. I couldn't believe what was happening. I came out here to deliver a pizza, and now there's a half-crazed man standing in front of me with a knife in his hand, telling me to open a box because he wants to make sure it's not a bomb. I obviously didn't want to stick around any longer. Without saying another word, I finally spun around and took off towards my car. Behind me, I could hear the man beginning to yell and scream at me. As I opened the door, I threw the pizza onto the passenger seat, started it up, and floored it out of there, not stopping until I got back to the pizza shop. I reported the incident to my manager, and they reported it higher up, but nothing came of it. No blacklist, no police report, no nothing. Just a warning to avoid that address in the future. Way to be concerned for the safety of your employees. The whole experience left me shaken and questioning the safety of my job. After a few weeks, I quit and decided to take on a different line of work. Never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would experience something like that delivering pizzas. But I did, and I'm thankful that I don't ever have to be put in a position to experience anything like that ever again. Story 3. Go Around Back. One night I was wrapping up my last delivery after a long shift. It was such a long day and all I wanted to do was finish up, get home, get cleaned up, and get to bed. But there was just one more pizza to drop off, one more address to find. I was driving to a place I'd never been before, an area so remote that I was surprised that we even took the order to deliver to this place. The woods around the road I had to drive on were thick and oppressive, and in order to get to the address, I had to navigate an uneven dirt road. When I finally arrived at the destination, I was greeted by a small house that could have been charming if not for its dilapidated state and the unnerving isolation. It was nestled in a small clearing, the trees around it giving it that extra touch of creepiness. The gravel beneath my feet sounded unnaturally loud as I approached the front door. My knock echoed in a way that made me feel even more alone. I waited, listening for the sound of the customer to approach the front door, but there was nothing. Thinking that maybe I didn't knock loud enough, I tried again, and again there was nothing. Anxious, I tapped on the window pane next to the door, hoping to catch a glimpse of the customer. As I waited, I briefly turned to scan the tree line, feeling exposed and vulnerable. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and my body was tense. As I faced the window again, I jolted back in a way that I never had before. A woman's face stared back at me, a mere few inches from the other side of the window. She was a hideous-looking woman. Her eyes were so intense that they almost glowed. She raised her bony hand and pointed towards the back of the house as the words, "Go around back," slithered from her lips. My mind screamed at me not to do it, that I should get out of there, but a deep-seated sense of duty urged me to complete the delivery. As I rounded the corner to the back of the house, I swear I heard the muffled laughter of children coming from within the house. Hesitating, but still feeling as though I needed to complete the order, I continued to walk around. As I did, the back gate came into view. What looked to be a beautiful white gate at one point was now smeared with streaks and splatters of what looked to be blood. It painted a picture of horror that made my stomach turn. I noticed a smell too. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was very unpleasant and made my alarm bells ring at full blast. Regretting my decision to walk around back, I was about to turn around when a voice pierced through the night. It was a cry for help, so raw and desperate that I could feel it reverberate through my entire body. It sounded like it came from every direction. It was both terrifying and desperate. I stood motionless for a second like a deer in headlights, my mind refusing to accept the cries that I just heard. Then it came again, a slow, drawn-out plea, full of pain and terror. It was the kind of sound that carves itself into your memory, a sound you can never unhear. That was my breaking point. I was done. The pizza, which moments ago was my priority, fell from my hands, hitting the ground with a soft thud that was quickly absorbed by the earth. I spun around and ran as fast as I could for my car. In that moment, I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about the delivery, and I didn't care about collecting payment. I was done, and I was leaving. I threw the car door open and jumped inside as quickly as I could. I dropped the keys once, then twice, cursing myself for doing so. When I finally managed to slide the key into the ignition, I didn't pause to breathe. I didn't pause to think. I just slammed the pedal to the floor and drove as fast as I could. As my car spun around, I dared to take one last look at the house. Through the windshield, in the beams of my headlights, I saw the sickly-looking old woman and twin girls, standing motionless, watching me with an intensity in their eyes that followed me as I peeled out of the place. I drove with a purpose to get back to the familiar lights of the city. Back at the pizza shop, I told my manager. I guess from the terror in my eyes, she could tell that I wasn't making the story up. "Were you hurt?" she asked. Physically, I wasn't. "Let's just write this one off then, and we'll put it on the list of addresses not to deliver to," she said, and it was good enough for me. I'll never be able to tell you what in the hell was going on out at that creepy house that night. Did somebody really need help? Or was I so creeped out that my mind was playing tricks on me? Honestly, I don't know for sure. What I do know, though, is that I will never ever go near that place ever again.